Lily Carter never imagined that the cold Manhattan rain would become the witness to the moment her world shattered. She had rushed across 3 blocks, her breath short, her ribs aching from pregnancy pains, her 7-month-old son clinging to her shoulder as she tried to shield him from the wind. The night smelled of wet concrete and cigarette smoke, a smell she had come to know too well in this city that promised hope but gave her nothing but exhaustion. She pushed open the glass door of Raven Bar with her free hand, her knuckles trembling. Inside, warm lights glowed, soft jazz floated through the air, and laughter drifted like perfume. But none of that warmth belonged to her. She spotted him immediately. Mark Doyle, her husband, the man she had once believed would love her forever, leaning against the polished mahogany bar, laughing too loudly, holding a woman who'd never known the weight of responsibility in her life. Vanessa Hale sat on his lap like she owned him, her red dress shimmering under the lights, her lips curved in a smile meant to hurt. Lily tightened her grip on her baby, feeling her heart race. She didn't want to fight. All she wanted was to tell Mark the truth, that the doctor had called earlier with news that frightened her, that her pregnancy was weakening her body faster than expected. She needed help. She needed support. She needed her husband. Instead, Mark looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger he owes nothing to. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his eyes flashing with irritation instead of concern. Vanessa smirked, sliding her hand along his thigh like she was claiming territory. "I came because you didn't answer your phone," Lily whispered. "The baby wasn't sleeping, and Mark, we need to talk." Mark's jaw tightened. "We're talking now, and you're embarrassing me." Lily felt her cheeks heat. "I'm not trying to embarrass you. Mark, please, I'm scared," the doctor said. Before she could finish, Vanessa let out a soft chuckle. "She's here to ruin your night, baby." Her voice was sweet but laced with poison. "Some women don't know when they're not wanted." Lily felt her throat close. The music suddenly seemed too loud, the air too heavy. She took a single step back, but Mark followed her, the smell of whiskey on his breath. "You always do this," he hissed. "Always needing something, always whining." "I'm pregnant, Mark," Lily said, tears burning her eyes. "I'm doing this alone. I'm tired." "Not my fault you can't handle life," he muttered. The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering. She rocked him gently, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please, let's just go home." But Mark's hand moved faster than her fear. A loud crack echoed through the bar. His palm struck her across the mouth with such force that she stumbled sideways. Her back slamming into a table, her baby cried out, terrified. Lily tasted blood instantly, metallic and warm. A sharp pain shot through her gums. Something felt loose. Something was wrong. Lily pressed her hand to her lips, trembling. The room froze. Conversations stopped. Glasses hovered midair. Vanessa didn't move. Mark looked strangely satisfied. Her vision blurred as a tooth slipped from her mouth and landed onto the wooden floor. Lily's knees buckled. But before she hit the ground, the bar door swung open, hard, banging against the wall with a force that silenced even the music. A tall figure stepped inside, soaked by the rain, his boots heavy against the floorboards, his eyes burning with a rage that could freeze the blood of any man alive. And when he whispered, "Lily?" Mark's face went white, because the nightmare he never expected had just walked into the room. Lily Carter had never thought of herself as a fragile woman, even though life had done its best to convince her otherwise. At 26, she carried more weight on her shoulders than most people twice her age. She wasn't just a young mother navigating sleepless nights. She was a waitress fighting to survive in Manhattan, a city that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Her days were a blur of aching feet, spilled coffee, frantic subway rides, and the constant fear of bills she couldn't pay. But somehow, in all that exhaustion, she still found the strength to smile at strangers, apologize when things weren't her fault, and whisper soft lullabies to her 7-month-old son Noah, even when she was too tired to stand. Before her life became a battlefield, Lily had been soft in a way that felt natural, not weak. She loved to bake blueberry muffins, kept a small notebook of sketches, and dreamed of one day opening a tiny bookstore cafe, somewhere quiet, somewhere far from subway crowds and landlords who banged on doors for rent she didn't have. She used to imagine little white lights hanging across the ceiling, the smell of warm cinnamon in the air, and shelves filled with books people could borrow, read, and return without judgment. It was the kind of dream she never dared say aloud, not even to Mark. Especially not to Mark. Because the man she married wasn't the man she thought she was choosing. In the beginning, Mark had seemed charming. He smiled easily, opened doors for her, and kissed her forehead like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. But after their wedding, small cracks formed. Tiny at first, then spreading like fractures in glass. He hated when she talked to other people. He rolled his eyes when she shared her dreams. He told her a bookstore cafe was cute, but only for people who didn't mind being poor. He complained about her job, her clothes, her voice, even the way she breathed when she was tired. Still, Lily stayed. She kept telling herself it wasn't abuse. It was stress, pressure, temporary. But temporary became permanent. And then she became pregnant. Pregnancy changed everything for her, but not for Mark. Where she felt hope blooming, he saw only inconvenience. Where she imagined their family growing, Mark complained about money. He mocked her cravings, criticized her weight, and dismissed every doctor appointment as drama. The night Noah was born, Lily cried from joy. Mark complained about the hospital food. When Lily struggled through postpartum pain, Mark stayed out late with coworkers. When the doctor warned that Lily's pregnancy with her second child would be high risk, Mark shrugged and said, "You'll manage. Women always do." She tried to ignore the signs. She convinced herself that things would get better, that Mark would change, that he would remember the promises he once made. But instead, his cruelty grew quieter, colder, and more deliberate. Money disappeared from their accounts. His phone was always locked. He came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. And when she cried, he called her weak. When she struggled to pay bills, he told her she was useless. When she begged him to come home early because the baby was sick, he laughed. Yet Lily endured. Not because she wanted to, but because she felt trapped. She had no family nearby, no savings, no backup plan. She worked double shifts at the diner, pressing through dizziness and swollen ankles because she needed formula and diapers. She lived on peanut butter sandwiches so the baby could have enough. She walked miles in the freezing cold because she couldn't afford cab fare. But she never stopped loving her son. She never stopped holding on. She never stopped believing that somewhere, somehow, things would get better. She just never imagined better would arrive the moment the man who abandoned her long ago stepped back into her life, bringing with him a storm powerful enough to change everything. And as Lily clutched her trembling son to her chest, she didn't know the man who had just walked into the bar wasn't merely her father. He was bringing the past she never knew she had. Manhattan had a way of swallowing people whole. Especially those like Lily Carter, too gentle for its hard edges, too hopeful for its cold reality. By day, the city sparkled with glass towers stretching into the clouds, but by night it revealed its true nature: sharp, noisy, rushed, indifferent. For Lily, Manhattan wasn't a dream. It was a maze she had been forced to endure. Every corner brought a reminder of how far her life had slipped from the fairy tale she once imagined. The streets were crowded with people hustling to survive, a reminder of just how easily someone like her could disappear without anyone noticing. Her apartment sat on the 5th floor of a narrow brownstone in Washington Heights, where the walls were cracked, the heating barely worked, and the sound of sirens never truly stopped. She lived in a space so small she could touch the kitchen counter while still standing beside her bed. The bathroom light flickered every time she turned it on, and the window couldn't fully close, letting in the winter air that nipped at Noah's cheeks. She stuffed towels into the gaps just to keep the cold from waking the baby at night. But still, she told herself it was home. A temporary home. A place she would leave behind someday. The diner where she worked wasn't much better. Nestled between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, its neon sign buzzed loudly, refusing to die even though it flickered like it wanted to. The smell of bacon grease clung to her clothes no matter how many times she washed them. She worked the morning shift, which meant waking before dawn, wrapping Noah in 2 blankets, and praying the babysitter wouldn't cancel like she often did. The morning crowd consisted of exhausted nurses, construction workers, and office clerks grabbing coffee before another long day. Lily served them with a smile, even when her feet throbbed so painfully she could barely stand. And then there was Raven Bar, the place where everything broke. It wasn't a glamorous Manhattan lounge, but it tried hard to pretend. Soft amber lights, leather booths, and jazz music drifting from hidden speakers created the illusion of sophistication. The bar attracted a crowd that wanted to feel important. Lawyers unwinding after 12-hour days, interns trying to impress managers, and people like Mark who believed expensive whiskey made them powerful. Lily had stepped inside Raven Bar only a handful of times in her life, usually to bring Mark home when he forgot the meaning of responsibility. Each time she felt out of place, like a stain on polished marble. Tonight, the contrast between her world and Mark's was heartbreaking. She stood in worn jeans and an oversized coat, her ponytail damp from the rain, holding her crying baby. Mark lounged by the bar in a crisp white shirt, his hair perfectly styled, laughing with Vanessa as if he didn't have a family waiting for him. Vanessa looked like she belonged there. Silky hair, flawless makeup, confidence radiating off her like perfume. Lily felt invisible in comparison. But even as the humiliation burned, something deeper simmered beneath it. She was tired. Tired of living on tips, tired of apologizing, tired of surviving instead of living. She didn't want Manhattan's chaos anymore. She didn't want to squeeze her dreams into the leftover corners of her life. She didn't know where she belonged, but she knew it wasn't here. Not in this bar, not in that tiny apartment, not in a life where her husband looked at her like she was nothing. The moment she hit the floor, pain shooting through her jaw as her tooth fell from her mouth, the city seemed to pause. For the first time in a long while, Lily saw Manhattan clearly. Not as an enemy, but as a place she could walk away from. She didn't know what waited beyond it. She didn't know what was coming next. All she knew was that the man who had just walked in carried an authority that didn't belong to this world of cheap excuses and broken promises. And the moment his shadow stretched across the bar floor, Manhattan suddenly felt too small to contain what was about to happen. Mark Doyle had once been the kind of man who could charm an entire room without trying. At least, that was the version of himself he liked to remember. The funny guy, the confident guy, the guy who turned heads for all the right reasons. But the truth was far less flattering. Mark wasn't charming. He was strategic. He didn't win people over. He manipulated them. And he didn't turn heads because of charisma. He did it because he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed life owed him more than he gave. He grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised in a cramped house with peeling paint and arguments echoing through the thin walls. His father was harsh, his mother worn out, and Mark learned early that the loudest voice usually won. By the time he reached adulthood, he had mastered the art of using anger, sharp, sudden, and explosive, to get what he wanted. Control wasn't something he sought, it was something he demanded. And when he couldn't control his world, he controlled the people in it. Meeting Lily had been convenient. She was soft-spoken, gentle, and too trusting, a combination Mark recognized instantly as useful. In the beginning, he played the attentive boyfriend because it cost him nothing. He flattered her, promised her stability, and painted himself as a man with ambition. But once she started depending on him, once the ring was on her finger, his efforts stopped. Responsibility irritated him. Lily's quiet strength felt like pressure. Motherhood looked like a burden. Mark wanted freedom, attention, and the security of a woman who would stay even when he mistreated her. And he mistreated her often. The words he used to tear her apart were precise, calculated. "You're too emotional. You can't take a joke. You'd be nowhere without me." When words weren't enough, he used silence. Days without acknowledgement, sleeping on the couch, disappearing without warning. When she cried, he accused her of manipulation. When she asked for help, he laughed. He resented her pregnancy, seeing it as an inconvenience that trapped him in a life he didn't want. He blamed her for the bills, the stress, the broken dreams he never worked for. Vanessa Hale fed every dark instinct he had. She entered his life like a spark thrown onto dry wood. Her bold red lips, her sharp voice, her love for chaos, they were everything his ego craved. Vanessa didn't care that he was married. She didn't care that Lily was pregnant. What she cared about was having power over him. She whispered in his ear that he deserved better, that Lily was dragging him down, that he should claim a life that matched his potential. And Mark believed her because it allowed him to avoid responsibility. The more time he spent with Vanessa, the crueler he became toward Lily. He stopped hiding the late nights. He stopped pretending he cared. He wore Vanessa's perfume on his shirt, and when Lily noticed, he accused her of being paranoid. Vanessa made him feel important, desirable, superior. And Mark was addicted to the feeling. So when Lily walked into Raven Bar that night, soaked from the rain, holding their baby, interrupting his fantasy, Mark's anger didn't come from surprise. It came from embarrassment. Vanessa's smirk told him exactly what he needed to do. To keep Vanessa impressed, to keep control, he had to put Lily in her place. He hadn't expected the hit to land as hard as it did. He hadn't expected her tooth to fall. He hadn't expected the entire bar to go silent. And he definitely hadn't expected the door to slam open the way it did. Because standing there was a man Mark barely remembered, but instantly feared. A man whose presence made the room feel colder. A man who once warned Mark what would happen if he ever hurt Lily. And for the first time in his life, Mark realized he had crossed a line he could never walk back from. Lily's cheek throbbed with a deep, spreading ache as she staggered upright, clutching Noah tightly to her chest. The bar's warm lighting seemed to flicker around her, blurring into a haze of shocked faces and half-raised glasses. Blood pooled on her tongue, metallic and bitter, reminding her of the tooth that had slipped from her mouth moments earlier. She tried to breathe steadily, but the air felt thick, heavy with humiliation and fear. Noah whimpered, sensing her distress. She rocked him gently, whispering his name through trembling lips. Around her, patrons exchanged uncertain glances, torn between sympathy and cowardice. No one stepped forward. No one challenged Mark. And that silence cut Lily deeper than the slap ever could. Mark's expression shifted from anger to annoyance, as if Lily's suffering were an inconvenience. He straightened his collar, shot a quick glance at Vanessa, and smirked as though he controlled the entire room. Vanessa leaned back lazily, crossing her legs, boredom in her eyes. She loved scenes like this, power plays, humiliation, moments where she could watch someone shatter. Lily swallowed hard, hoping to steady herself before her legs betrayed her again. She pressed a shaking hand against the table to keep from collapsing. The bartender glanced her way but quickly looked down, pretending to polish a glass. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Lily could feel it, taste it, sense it tightening around her lungs. Mark stepped toward her, his posture stiff with irritation rather than remorse. "Get up," he muttered, as though she had fallen on purpose. His voice carried the same coldness he used whenever she asked for help. Noah began to cry louder, frightened by the tension. Lily tightened her grip on him, refusing to let Mark's shadow fall any closer to her child. Vanessa's smirk widened, her eyes glittering with cruel satisfaction. She whispered something to Mark, something Lily couldn't hear, but she recognized the tone that pushed Mark into darkness. Vanessa loved being the spark that ignited chaos. She thrived on destruction, especially when it made her feel superior. Lily saw it clearly now. Vanessa didn't want Mark, she wanted control. Standing there, bleeding and humiliated, Lily felt something she hadn't felt in years: clarity. This was not love, this was not marriage, this was survival, and she was losing. Her entire world had narrowed to the weight of Noah in her arms and the crushing truth that Mark would never change. She had tried, she had begged, she had endured, but tonight felt final. Mark reached for her, grabbing her arm with a force that made her cry out. The pain shot up her shoulder, sharp and immediate. One more tug and she might have fallen again. The bar patrons looked away, pretending not to witness the violence unfolding inches from them. Mark leaned in, his breath hot with anger. "You're not leaving," he growled. Lily's knees weakened, but she didn't fall. She couldn't. Noah needed her steady. She tried to pull her arm back, tried to protect her child from the fury radiating off Mark. Her vision blurred, but she refused to break in front of him again. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to beg, maybe to stand up for herself, when the bar door slammed open. Every head turned. Cold wind rushed inside, sweeping through the room like a warning. The figure in the doorway stood tall, rain dripping from his coat, eyes locked on Lily with a fury that didn't belong to a stranger. Mark's grip loosened instantly. This wasn't a customer. This was the one man Mark feared in his life. And the moment he stepped forward, the entire bar felt the shift. Danger had just arrived. Lily felt the world tilt beneath her feet as the man in the doorway stepped forward, his boots thudding against the wooden floor in a rhythm that echoed through her bones. But even as the room seemed to vibrate with his presence, her body had reached its limit. Noah's cries grew louder, piercing through the haze in her mind, but Lily could barely focus. Her cheek burned. Her gums throbbed. Her vision pulsed in and out like a flickering light struggling to stay alive. No one had ever told her that fear could make a person feel so cold. Not the kind of cold that came from winter wind, but the cold that seeped into the soul. The cold of being alone, helpless, and hurt beyond what words could express. She held Noah tighter, but her arm trembled, her muscles weak from the shock and pain. The bar around her felt distant, like she was sinking underwater while everyone else remained on the surface. Mark's grip had loosened when the stranger entered, but Lily's knees buckled anyway. She had been holding herself up for months, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and tonight the strain finally broke her. A sharp wave of dizziness washed over her, blurring the edges of the room. The voices around her turned muffled, like they were speaking from behind thick glass. She felt herself tipping forward. A chair leg scraped against the floor. Someone gasped. Noah wailed. But Lily couldn't stop it. Her body collapsed toward the ground, her arms instinctively curling around her baby to protect him, even as her own strength abandoned her. The world spun, colors bleeding into each other, until all she could see was a smear of red and gold. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Warm hands, familiar hands. For a moment, Lily thought she was dreaming. No one had caught her in so long. No one had held her with care in what felt like another lifetime. Her cheek pressed against a broad shoulder that smelled faintly of rain and worn leather. The sound of a steady heartbeat filled her ear, a contrast to the chaotic thudding inside her own chest. "Lily," the man murmured, his voice low but trembling with controlled rage. "It's okay. I've got you." She tried to lift her head but couldn't. Her body felt heavy, weights tied to every limb. She fought to stay conscious, fought to speak, fought to breathe evenly for Noah's sake. But her throat tightened, and only a weak, broken sound escaped. Mark's voice pierced through the haze. "She's being dramatic," he snapped, though his voice cracked with unease. "She does this all the time. She's fine." The man holding Lily turned his head, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "You laid your hands on my daughter," he said, each word a blade. A daughter. The word rippled through the bar, freezing even the air. Lily blinked slowly, trying to make sense of the voice, the warmth, the overwhelming sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. She remembered that voice, from childhood, from nights when he used to tuck her in before life took him far away. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room erupted. Chairs scraped back. People stood. Whispers exploded like sparks. Mark staggered a step backward, his face draining of color. Vanessa's smirk vanished, replaced by something close to fear. The man, her father, looked down at her, eyes filled with something fierce and protective, something she hadn't seen since she was a little girl. "Don't try to talk," he murmured. "You're safe now. I'm taking you and my grandson out of here." Lily tried to hold on to his shirt, but her hand slipped, her fingers barely closing around the fabric. Her heart pounded erratically. She could feel herself fading, slipping into a darkness she didn't want to enter. Noah cried louder, desperate and afraid. Her father tightened his hold. And just before consciousness left her, Lily heard his voice again, cold, controlled, lethal. "Mark Doyle, pray you don't touch a single person I love ever again, because tonight is only the beginning." The rain hammered the sidewalk outside Raven Bar as Richard Carter carried his daughter out of the door with a strength fueled not by muscle, but by fury. His coat clung to his shoulders, soaked through, yet he didn't seem to notice. All his focus, every drop of attention was on Lily, limp in his arms, her cheek bruised, her lips swollen, her breath unsteady. Noah cried against her chest, tiny fists trembling as if he feared the world itself had turned against them. Richard moved quickly, decisively, as though he'd been preparing for this moment for years. And in a way, he had. For too long he'd stayed away, believing his distance protected Lily from the shadows of his past. But the moment he saw her inside that bar, bleeding, holding her baby, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her, he knew his absence had not shielded her. It had abandoned her. And that guilt burned hotter than any anger he felt for Mark. He reached his car, a black Mercedes S-Class parked half on the curb, and opened the back door with one hand. Inside, the leather was warm, the air scented with cedar, a stark contrast to the cold chaos outside. Carefully, he laid Lily across the seat, adjusting her coat around her. Noah was still crying, but Richard gently stroked the baby's back, murmuring softly until the cries became quieter, more desperate than loud. "Shh! I know, little man," Richard whispered, voice breaking. "I've got you both now." He closed the door and turned back toward the bar. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. Rain slid down his face, but nothing softened the storm inside him. Inside Raven Bar, patrons whispered nervously. Mark stood rigid, shifting from foot to foot, clearly unsure whether to run or defend himself. Vanessa stayed seated, though her eyes darted toward the exit, calculating an escape. Richard stepped through the doorway, the sound of his boots hitting the floor like warning drums. The room fell silent once more. He scanned the bar slowly, methodically, until his gaze locked onto Mark. "Richard? Richard," Mark stammered, forcing a thin, uneasy smile. "I didn't know you were in New York." "You didn't know a lot of things," Richard replied, voice low enough to rattle glass. Mark swallowed hard. "Lily, she's fine. She overreacts." Richard didn't blink. "You hit her." "That's not, she pushed me first." Mark lied quickly. "And she was yelling. She wouldn't stop." "She's pregnant," Richard said, words slicing the air, "and she was holding your child." The silence turned suffocating. Vanessa opened her mouth, perhaps to defend herself, but Richard didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Mark, cold and unmoving. Mark tried to puff his chest, tried to regain the control he always relied on, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You can't just come here and threaten me," Mark said weakly. "This is between her and me." Richard took a step forward. "No," he said, "this is between you and me." Mark stepped back instinctively, bumping into a bar stool. The bartender froze mid-clean. A woman near the entrance covered her mouth. Richard's presence filled every corner of the dimly lit room, making even the shadows seem afraid. "When you married my daughter," Richard continued, "I told you one thing only." His voice dropped to a rasp. "Never hurt her." Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Richard leaned in, his words barely audible yet heavy enough to choke the room. "And tonight, you made sure I will never forget the mistake I made letting you into her life." Mark paled. "What do you want?" Richard straightened slowly, his posture calm, terrifyingly calm. "What I want," he said, "is already waiting for you outside." Vanessa stiffened. "What does that mean?" Richard looked at her then, once, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet another 10 degrees. "It means," he said quietly, "your night is about to get much worse." And before anyone could move, Mark realized something chilling. Richard hadn't come alone. The alley behind Raven Bar was narrow, dimly lit, and slick with rainwater. Garbage cans lined the brick wall, their lids rattling in the wind. It was the kind of place people avoided. Too dark, too quiet, too easy to disappear into. And tonight, it became the place Mark Doyle would never forget for the rest of his life. Richard Carter stepped out first, the bar's back door slamming shut behind him. Two men stood waiting beside the black Mercedes SUV parked crookedly in the alley. They were tall, broad, dressed in dark jackets, and carried themselves with the silence of men who didn't need to explain their presence. They nodded at Richard with the familiarity of old loyalty. "Is she safe?" one of them asked. Richard nodded once. "In the car." The other man cracked his knuckles. "Good." Inside the bar, Mark hesitated. Vanessa tugged at his sleeve, her voice sharp with panic. "Mark, we need to go. Now. That man is dangerous." Mark tried to muster his old arrogance, but it faltered. His breath came shallow and fast. "He can't do anything. This is New York. He's bluffing." Vanessa's eyes widened in disbelief. "You just hit his pregnant daughter? In front of half the bar. Do you really think he's bluffing?" Mark didn't have time to answer. The back door flew open again, banging against the wall with a crack. Richard stood in the doorway, framed by the storm behind him, his expression carved from stone. "Outside," he said. Mark froze. "Richard, come on. We can talk." Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I said outside. Mark stepped back, bumping into a table. Look, I didn't mean to hurt her. She startled me. You hit her while she held your son. Mark swallowed. Hard. And you're going to answer for that. Suddenly, the two men from the alley appeared behind Richard. Their presence made Vanessa gasp and step away from Mark as if distancing herself might save her. The men flanked Richard, waiting. Take him, Richard said simply. Mark spun to run, but one of the men grabbed him by the back of his shirt, yanking him off his feet. His scream echoed through the bar, bouncing off the walls and shattering the frozen silence inside. Patrons surged backward, some covering their faces, others staring in horrified fascination. Vanessa darted toward the exit, but Richard's voice stopped her cold. You too. She froze mid-step. What? I didn't touch her. You encouraged him. You recorded it. You enjoyed it. Her face drained of color. Don't worry, he added, voice calm as ice. Your turn comes later. Vanessa backed against the wall, unable to breathe. Mark, meanwhile, was dragged through the back door, kicking and yelling. Rain poured down on him as the men hauled him into the alley like a man being delivered to judgment. His shoes scraped the pavement, his hands clawed at their grips. But there was no escape. Please, Richard, stop. Listen, we can fix this. You had years to fix this, Richard said, stepping into the rain, and you did nothing but break her. Mark was shoved against the SUV, his chest slamming the metal hard enough to knock the breath out of him. What are you doing? He wheezed. Richard leaned in close, voice low. You're going somewhere quiet, somewhere you can't lie, somewhere you can't hide. Mark's eyes widened. No, don't, please. The men opened the SUV door. Basement, one of them said. Mark began shaking so hard he nearly collapsed. Richard, I'm sorry. I swear I'm sorry. Don't do this. It's already done. The men shoved him inside the SUV. The door slammed. His cries were muffled instantly. Vanessa stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Richard turned his head toward her. You have 15 minutes, he said quietly. Then we talk. Her knees buckled, because for the first time Vanessa understood something terrifying. Mark wasn't the only one Richard came for tonight. Lily surfaced from darkness slowly, as though she were swimming upward through layers of thick, warm fog. Her body felt heavy, too heavy, like she'd been asleep for days. A soft beeping sound echoed somewhere nearby. The air smelled faintly of lavender and clean cotton, a scent she hadn't known in years. No stale smoke, no mold from the old apartment walls, no harsh city fumes sneaking through broken windows. This air felt safe. Her eyelids fluttered open, light filtered in, golden and gentle, not harsh like the flickering bulbs back in Manhattan. She blinked, confused, disoriented. She was lying on a bed. No, not just a bed. A wide, plush, king-size bed covered in white linens that felt like clouds beneath her fingertips. A soft blanket was draped over her, tucked with care. She slowly pushed herself up, wincing as her cheek throbbed. The bruise was tender, her jaw stiff, but nothing hurt as much as the memory of Mark's hand. For a moment she panicked. Where was Noah? Before fear could spiral, she heard a soft coo. Her eyes snapped to the right. Noah lay peacefully in a bassinet beside the bed, wrapped in a warm blue blanket she didn't recognize. His cheeks were rosy, his tiny chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Relief crashed into her so hard she felt tears sting her eyes. She reached out, touching his belly with shaky fingers. You're okay, she whispered. Thank God, you're okay. The room came into focus as she took everything in. It wasn't a hospital. The walls were painted a soft cream, accented with dark wood beams and warm lighting. A large window looked out over a sprawling field bathed in early morning sun. In the corner stood a rocking chair carved from oak, with a folded quilt draped over the back. A table nearby held a pitcher of water, a vase of wildflowers, and, unexpectedly, an iPhone charging on a sleek docking stand. She stared, confused. Where was she? The door opened with a soft click. Her father stepped inside. Richard Carter, still in the same rain-soaked boots but now wearing a fresh shirt, looked older than she remembered, and somehow stronger. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set, but when he saw her awake, his features softened in a way she hadn't seen since she was a child. Lily, he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. You're awake. She swallowed hard. Dad, where are we? Texas, he replied, stepping closer. My home, your home, if you want it to be. Texas. She hadn't been there since she was 11. After her mother died, everything between her and Richard became a blur of distance and unanswered questions. And now here she was, in a room that radiated comfort, worlds apart from the life she had just escaped. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Noah? Is he? He's perfect," Richard said gently. "He slept for hours, he's warm, fed, safe. You both are." Safe. It was the first time she'd heard that word without irony in years. She wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. "What? What happened to Mark?" Richard's expression darkened, but his voice stayed level. "You don't need to worry about him right now." Her stomach tightened. "Dad, what did you do?" He sat at the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "I did what I should have done a long time ago," he said. "I brought you home." She shook her head slightly. "Mark, he's going to be furious. He'll come for me." Richard met her gaze, and for the first time, she noticed the cold steel behind his eyes. "He won't," he said. "Not after tonight." "Why?" she whispered. He brushed her hair gently behind her ear. "Because some men don't respond to warnings." He paused. "And now, he's learning what consequences feel like." Lily's breath hitched. "Dad, what exactly did you do?" Richard stood slowly, his silhouette outlined by the morning sun pouring through the window. What he said next sent a shiver through her entire body. "Let's just say Mark is somewhere he can finally hear himself for the first time." Lily leaned back against the pillows, her breath unsteady as she processed her father's words. The morning light washed across the room, soft and golden, but nothing felt soft inside her. Her father stood near the window, arms crossed, posture rigid enough to crack stone. He looked like a man holding back a storm. And for the first time, she realized the anger she always sensed in him wasn't cold, it was protective. "Dad?" she whispered. "What does that mean? What did you do?" Richard didn't answer at first. His jaw clenched. His fingers tapped against his bicep in a rhythm she recognized from her childhood, the rhythm he used whenever he was deciding how much truth the world deserved to hear. Then he exhaled slowly. "Lily, there are things I never told you. Things I should have explained a long time ago." Her stomach twisted. "About what?" "About why I left," he said quietly. The room seemed to shrink around them. For years she'd carried the belief that her father abandoned her after her mother died. She remembered the arguments, the long stretches of silence, the way he slipped further away each month. A child fills in the blanks with pain when no one gives them answers. And Lily had filled in plenty. "Dad, you just disappeared," she murmured, her voice cracking. "You didn't call. You didn't write. You didn't—" "I know," he cut in, voice rough, "and I won't defend it. But I didn't walk away from you. I walked toward a war I didn't want you trapped in." "A war?" she repeated, confused. Richard stepped toward the bed, pulling the wooden chair closer. He sat, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together. "I used to own a contracting company in Texas," he began. "A good one, hundreds of employees. We built hospitals, schools, entire neighborhoods, but we crossed paths with a man who didn't like competition." Lily's pulse quickened. "Who?" she asked. "Thomas Hale," Richard answered. "Vanessa's father." The name hit her like a cold wave. "Her father?" Richard nodded. "He runs one of the biggest development conglomerates in the state, and he wanted my company, my contracts, my land. When I refused to sell, things escalated." "What does that mean?" Lily asked, her breath shallow. "It means he played dirty," Richard said. "He undercut bids, bribed inspectors, paid off officials to stall my projects, and when that didn't break me, he sent men to vandalize sites. Trucks went missing. Employees were threatened. One night, my office was burned to the ground." Lily covered her mouth. "Dad, that fire killed 3 men," he said softly. "And even though I knew Hale orchestrated it, I couldn't prove it." Tears filled Lily's eyes. For the first time, she understood the weight her father carried. The silence, the distance, the darkness she never understood. "I thought you left because of me," she whispered. Richard's face cracked with grief. "Sweetheart, I left to keep you alive. After the fire, Hale made it clear, if I didn't back down, my family wouldn't be safe. So I sent you to live with your aunt, and I went underground to fight him from the shadows." "Why didn't you come back?" she whispered. "Because the war didn't end," he said. "Every time I got close to exposing him, something else happened. Hale was always one step ahead." His voice tightened. "I thought I still had more time to fix it before it touched you." "But it did," Lily said, her voice breaking. "Through Vanessa." Richard nodded grimly. She's her father's daughter, ambitious, ruthless, and brilliant at manipulating weak men like Mark. She knew who you were long before you knew who she was. Lily's heart pounded. So Mark was just a pawn? Yes, Richard said, a disposable one. Lily's hand trembled as she gripped the blanket. Everything suddenly made sense. Vanessa's smirk, her taunts, her eagerness to create chaos. This wasn't jealousy or infatuation. It was revenge. Calculated, inherited revenge. Her father leaned closer, lowering his voice. And that's why I came for you, he whispered. Because the moment Mark hit you, Vanessa won her final piece of leverage. Lily swallowed. Leverage for what? Richard stood, his expression turning into something dark and dangerous. For the next move in a war I never wanted you anywhere near. He paused. And this time, sweetheart, they chose the wrong daughter. Mark Doyle woke to darkness. Thick, suffocating darkness that pressed against his skin like wet cloth. His head throbbed. His mouth tasted of metal and fear. At first, he didn't know where he was. He tried to lift his hands but felt resistance. Rope. His wrists were tied behind the back of a wooden chair. His ankles bound to its legs. Panic flashed through him, sharp and electric. Hello, he shouted, voice cracking. Richard? Vanessa? Anyone, hello? His words bounced back in a hollow echo. Wherever he was, it wasn't big. It smelled of damp concrete and old tools, a scent that reminded him vaguely of the basement in his childhood home. But this space was colder, thicker, as if it had never seen sunlight. A single bulb flickered on overhead. Mark blinked hard, momentarily blinded. When his eyes adjusted, the room came into view. Cinder block walls, exposed pipes, a thick wooden support beam, and a metal table pushed against the far wall. A tool chest rested beside it, half open. He could make out the silhouette of pliers, a wrench, heavy-duty clamps. Sweat gathered at the back of his neck. Richard? He called again, voice trembling this time. Silence. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He pulled at the ropes, twisting violently, desperate, muscles screaming in protest. The chair didn't even creak. Whoever tied him knew exactly what they were doing. He swallowed hard. This isn't legal, he muttered to the empty room. This is kidnapping. I'll call the cops. I'll file charges. A voice cut through the air. Mark, it said calmly. Too calmly. The basement door opened at the top of a short staircase. Light from the hallway spilled in briefly before the door closed again. Boots echoed on the wooden steps, slow, steady, deliberate. Mark's pulse quickened as Richard Carter descended, sleeves rolled up, face expressionless. Good, Richard said. You're awake? Mark tried to straighten his posture, to appear stronger than he felt, but his body betrayed him. He shook visibly. Richard, listen, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake, a huge one. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking clearly. Lily startled me. I didn't mean. Richard stopped in front of him, staring down with a calmness more terrifying than rage. You hit my daughter while she held your son, he said softly. You didn't make a mistake, you made a decision. Mark swallowed. Okay, yes, I made a bad decision. But we can fix this. I'll apologize, I'll check her into a hospital, I'll say it was an accident. Richard's tone sharpened. An accident? Mark froze. You've been hitting her for months, Richard continued. Not once, not twice. Patterns leave evidence, Mark. Mark's breath stuttered. What are you talking about? Richard stepped aside. Behind him, a monitor flickered to life, mounted on the wall directly across from Mark. A video timeline stretched across the bottom. A paused frame sat at the center. It was Lily, standing in their old apartment, holding Noah, her cheek bruised, her eyes red. Mark's throat went dry. How did you? Richard clicked the play button. Audio crackled, then filled the basement. Mark heard his own voice on the recording, sharp, mocking, cruel. You're worthless. You don't deserve me. No wonder no one wants to help you. Mark shook violently. That's taken out of context. Richard clicked again. The moment Mark shoved Lily into the wall exploded onto the screen. Then the moment he threw a glass at her feet. Then the moment he yanked her by the arm hard enough to make her cry. No, Mark whispered, tears forming. No, this isn't. You didn't know Lily installed a nanny cam for Noah's safety, Richard said quietly. She forgot it was still recording. Mark's breath hitched as more clips flashed across the screen, each worse than the last. His own cruelty, documented, undeniable. Richard stepped closer. You didn't just hit her, he said. You tried to break her. Mark shook his head violently. Please, I'll do anything. I'll fix it. I'll leave her alone. You had years to do better, Richard replied. Years. He leaned down, eyes level with Mark's. And now, you're going to listen? To what? Mark whispered, voice cracking. Richard walked to the table, picked up a small black device, and set it in front of the monitor. A red light blinked on. A confession. Mark felt his blood run cold. A what? You're going to tell the truth, Richard said, voice deadly calm. Every lie, every bruise, every threat, every time you touched her in anger. I won't, Mark spat. Richard smiled, not kindly. You will. He clicked a button. The door behind them locked with a hard metallic snap. Because, Mark, Richard said softly, we're not leaving this room until you do. Vanessa Hale had always believed she was untouchable. Her entire life had been paved with privilege, private schools, elite parties, luxury vacations, and doors that opened simply because of her last name. She moved through the world like a woman who owned it, and most of the time, she did. People bowed to her charm, feared her temper, and admired her ambition. She played games with reputations, stirred chaos for entertainment, and destroyed people with a smile so sweet it could rot teeth. But tonight, for the first time in years, Vanessa felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Real fear. It crawled up her spine as she sat in the dim back hallway of Raven Bar, her breath unsteady, her hands trembling despite her attempts to keep them still. She stared at the rain-soaked footprints Richard Carter had left on the floor. Those prints felt like warnings, small, muddy reminders that she had stepped far over a line she could never uncross. She tried to regain her composure, lifting her chin, adjusting the strap of her dress. But her reflection in the bar's dusty mirror startled her. Her mascara had smudged, her eyes looked wild. Her confidence, usually impenetrable, had cracks running straight through it. Her phone vibrated in her purse. Her father's name flashed on the screen. Thomas Hale, she answered shakily. Dad? Vanessa, he said sharply. I saw the footage. Her stomach dropped. What footage? A tense pause. The bar camera. The one that caught you laughing while that idiot boyfriend of yours hit the Carter girl. Vanessa's blood ran cold. How did you? Richard leaked it, Thomas snapped. I got a call 30 minutes ago from one of my board members threatening to resign if this mess touches our name. Her breath hitched. Dad, I didn't know someone was recording. You should have assumed someone always is, Thomas growled. You created a liability. You embarrassed the family. And worse, you dragged us back into a feud I spent years burying. Vanessa swallowed. I can fix it. You can't fix anything, Thomas hissed. Not this time. Her hand tightened around her phone. You're the one who told me the Carters ruined everything. You said they deserved. I said enough to keep you cautious, he cut in. Not enough to send you spiraling into a public disaster. She felt her throat close. Dad, don't abandon me. Then you shouldn't have picked a fight with Richard Carter, he said, voice dropping into something dark. I warned you, he is not a man you provoke, he's a man you avoid. Her pulse hammered. What's he going to do? She whispered. Her father hesitated, and that hesitation terrified her more than anything he could have said. Leave the bar, Thomas instructed. Take the car I sent. Go to the condo in Houston. Lay low, do not speak to anyone, and for God's sake, stay away from Mark Doyle. He's a sinking ship. I can't just disappear, Vanessa protested. People will ask questions. Let them, Thomas snapped. Because if Richard Carter decides he wants a bigger piece of revenge, Vanessa, listen to me carefully, you won't want to be anywhere he can find you. The call ended abruptly. Vanessa slowly lowered the phone. Her entire body trembled. When she stood, her legs nearly buckled. She steadied herself against the wall, breathing hard, panic exploding through her chest in waves she couldn't control. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't flirting with danger. This was danger. Real, tangible, closing in danger. A sudden knock made her gasp. She spun. Richard Carter stood at the other end of the hallway, blocking the exit, rain dripping from his hair, eyes fixed on her with quiet, lethal calculation. Time's up, he said. Vanessa's breath caught. What do you want from me? Richard stepped forward, each step deliberate, controlled, terrifyingly calm. Answers, he said, and then the truth. She pressed back against the wall as he stopped inches from her. His presence swallowed the hallway. Richard, please, she whispered. I didn't mean for any of this to go this far. He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he'd already solved. Oh, Vanessa, he murmured. His voice was almost gentle. Almost. You haven't even begun to see how far this goes. And before she could run, Richard reached behind her and locked the only door she could have escaped through. Morning drifted slowly across the Texas landscape, coloring the sky in warm shades of peach and gold. Birds called from the distant oak trees, and the air felt gentle in a way Manhattan never had. Lily sat on the wide porch of her father's ranch house, wrapped in a soft knit sweater that wasn't hers. Noah slept in her arms, his tiny breaths warming her chest. For the first time in months, she didn't feel cold. But she didn't feel calm either. Her father's revelations from the night before kept circling in her mind like storm clouds. Thomas Hale, Vanessa, the fire, the war she never knew existed. The reality hit her. She hadn't walked into a simple marriage with a simple man. She had stepped, unknowingly, into a battlefield built long before she was old enough to understand danger. She looked down at her bruised hands, the faint purple marks on her arms. Evidence of a life she'd been surviving, not living. Evidence she had once tried to hide from everyone, including herself. Now she was sitting in the safety of her father's land, surrounded by silence and open fields, but her heart felt restless. She didn't want to hide. She didn't want to be hunted. She didn't want to be pitied. She wanted answers. She wanted justice. And she wanted control of her life again. Footsteps sounded behind her. Lily didn't turn. She recognized the heavy, steady rhythm. Her father stepped onto the porch carrying 2 mugs of warm coffee. He handed one to her, then sat beside her on the wooden bench, his eyes scanning the horizon. "You slept a little," he said softly. "A little," she admitted. Noah stirred but didn't wake. She gently rocked him, letting silence settle between them. For once, silence wasn't painful. It was grounding. Richard inhaled deeply. "You're safe here." Lily nodded but didn't answer. Richard glanced at her. But safety isn't enough, not for someone who's been hurt. Her chest tightened. "Dad, I know that look," he said. "Your mother had it too, the look of a woman who's done being afraid." Tears pricked her eyes, not from weakness, but from the bittersweet ache of being understood. "I can't go back to hiding," Lily whispered. "I can't let Mark or Vanessa or anyone decide what happens to me ever again." Richard nodded slowly. "What do you want to do?" She swallowed, shifting Noah gently so he rested on her shoulder. "I want to take my life back," she said. "I want full custody. I want legal protection. I want the truth out. And I want to stop feeling like I'm one step away from losing everything." Her father looked proud in a way she hadn't seen since she was a little girl, showing him her drawings. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "But I don't have money," she whispered. "I can't afford lawyers. I can't afford—" "You don't need to," he interrupted. "I have a legal team already working. They flew in last night. They're here for you, not for me." She blinked. "For me?" Richard leaned back, eyes scanning the open land. "I spent years fighting alone," he said. "But this is your fight, and you won't face it without the best people on your side." Lily lowered her gaze to Noah, his tiny fingers curled around her sweater. "Will I win?" she asked quietly. Her father turned to her with a steady, unwavering certainty. "You will," he said, "because we're not just fighting for justice anymore." He paused. "We're fighting for your future, for your son's future, and no judge, no lawyer, no corrupt man will stand in the way of that." A breath escaped her, one she hadn't realized she'd been holding for months. Relief and determination slowly intertwined inside her chest. Lily straightened her back. "I want to start today." Richard's lips twitched, something between a smile and a solemn vow. "You will." "And Dad?" Lily added softly. "Yes, I'm not afraid anymore." For a moment, the Texas morning felt brighter. Richard placed a strong hand over hers. "Good," he said, because he knew what came next would shake the world they were fighting. And somewhere deep underground, in the dark basement where Mark was trapped, a confession was finally beginning to break. The basement felt colder now. Mark's breath came out in sharp bursts, fogging the air in front of him as he strained once more against the ropes cutting into his wrists. Hours had passed, he didn't know how many. The single bulb above him buzzed, swaying slightly as if mocking his desperation. On the monitor, the paused image of his own face, red, twisted with anger, stared back at him from one of the nanny cam recordings Richard had uncovered. He couldn't look at it anymore. He couldn't look at himself. "Please," he whispered into the silence. "Please, someone let me out." But the basement did not care. Another hour crawled by. Mark's throat felt raw from yelling. His wrists burned. His mind raced with panic. The fear that had begun as a cold ripple was now a full-blown storm inside his chest. He'd always believed he could control any situation. Lily, her emotions, their home, even Vanessa. Manipulation was easy for him. Everything in life had been a game of domination. But this wasn't his game. It was Richard Carter's. And Richard wasn't playing. "Okay," Mark muttered, breathing hard. "Okay, think. His eyes darted around the room. Pipes, concrete walls, a single door with a heavy lock, tools on a table. Nothing he could reach, nothing he could use. He was trapped in every sense of the word, physically, mentally, morally. A sudden click echoed through the room. The basement door opened. Mark jerked upright, heart slamming against his ribs. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate. But it wasn't Richard. A woman appeared in the dim light. Vanessa. Her mascara was smudged, her hair damp, her expression twisted with a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. She walked toward him, arms folded tightly over her chest as though holding herself together. "Vanessa?" Mark gasped. "Thank God, please, untie me. Please, get me out of here." She didn't move. Instead, she stared at him with eyes he didn't recognize. Not seductive, not confident, not mocking, empty. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she whispered. Mark's brow furrowed. "Me? You're the one who pushed me." "Don't," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Don't you dare try to twist this on me. Not here, not now." Mark's breath hitched. "Vanessa, listen. Richard is out of his mind. He's dangerous. He'll kill us both." "No," she said quietly. "He won't kill you. That's not his style." "But he kidnapped me. He doesn't need to kill you," Vanessa murmured. "He just needs your confession. And when he gets it," she exhaled shakily, "you'll destroy yourself." Mark stared, panic rising. "Vanessa, help me. You're the only one who can." She let out a broken laugh. "I can't even help myself. My father is furious. The board is pressuring him. My name is trending on social media, and not the good kind. You think I have power right now?" She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You ruined everything." Mark's face contorted. "I ruined everything? You used me. You filmed me. Stop," she said sharply. "Yes, I recorded you. Yes, I pushed you. But you're the one who hit her. You're the one who crossed the line, and now we're both going to pay for it." "Then untie me," Mark begged. "We can run, together. Please. Van, I love you." The moment the word love left his mouth, Vanessa's expression hardened into stone. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "You love no one, not me, not her, not even your own son." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I thought I could control you," she murmured. "I thought men like you were useful, predictable, easy to play." She leaned in, her breath trembling. "But I underestimated one thing, just how violent your cowardice is." Mark's eyes widened. "Vanessa," she straightened, wiping her cheek with a shaky hand. "I'm not here to save you," she said. He froze. "I'm here," she continued, "to save myself." What does that mean?" Vanessa stepped back toward the stairs. "It means I'm giving Richard everything," she said. "Every message, every recording, every voicemail, everything you ever said about Lily, everything you ever sent to me." Mark's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't," he croaked. She paused on the first step. "You bet I would," she whispered. Then she delivered the blow that shattered whatever illusion of control he had left. "Because between you and me, one of us has to go down, and it won't be me." The Texas afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the guest room, painting soft patterns across the walls. Lily stood before the mirror, her fingers gently tracing the fading bruise along her cheek. It was still tender, still visible, but no longer the dark, angry mark it had been just days ago. She inhaled slowly. The wound was healing, and so was she. On the bed beside her lay a folder her father's legal team had brought earlier that morning. Thick, heavy, full of papers she once would have been terrified to read. Custody orders, restraining motions, copies of bank transfers showing Mark siphoning money from their joint account. Screenshots of messages he'd sent Vanessa bragging about keeping Lily in line. Even police reports Lily didn't remember filing, reports the officers never followed up on. She stared at the documents, her stomach twisting with a mixture of dread and determination. A week ago, this folder would have crushed her. Now it fueled her. Noah babbled from the bassinet, kicking his legs happily. She smiled and lifted him into her arms, pressing his warm cheek against her lips. His little giggle filled the room like sunlight. He was her strength. he always had been. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said. Richard stepped inside, holding a cup of warm tea. He had changed out of his ranch clothes into a crisp button-down shirt, looking more like the businessman he once was. But his eyes, tired, fierce, loving, were all father. "How are you holding up?" he asked, handing her the cup. Lily took it, grateful for the heat against her palms. "I'm trying." Richard hesitated. "You've been reading the documents?" She nodded. "And?" he asked. "I'm angry," she said simply. Richard exhaled, almost relieved. "Good. Anger means you're waking up." Lily looked down at Noah, who had begun chewing on her sweater sleeve. "I don't want to be angry forever." "You won't," Richard said. "But for now, anger is a bridge. It gets you from where you were to where you need to be." She let those words settle, where she needed to be, not frightened, not apologizing for everything, not shrinking herself to keep the peace. A new place. A place she would choose for herself and her son. "I want to fight him," she said quietly. "I want full custody. I want the court to know who he really is." Richard nodded. "You'll have it." "But," her voice shook, "Dad, what if he wins? What if he convinces them I'm unstable or weak?" "Or—" "Lily," Richard interrupted gently, "you are not weak. You survived him. That alone is strength most people will never understand." She blinked back tears. "I don't want Noah to ever remember him like this." "He won't," Richard said firmly, "not if we stop him now." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the wind rustled through the tall grass. A hawk circled overhead, slow and deliberate. "Tomorrow," Richard said, "the legal team wants to meet with you. They'll prepare your statement for the court. This isn't an easy process, but you won't go through it alone." Lily nodded. Okay. And Lily?" her father added. "Someone will be joining us, someone I trust." She frowned. "Who?" Before Richard could answer, another knock sounded at the doorframe. A deep, steady voice spoke. "May I come in?" Lily turned, and her breath caught. Ethan Ward stepped into the room, broad-shouldered, calm, dressed in a tailored navy shirt that made him look like he belonged in a boardroom overlooking a skyline. She recognized him from years ago, one of her father's old associates, a man whose kindness had once made her teenage heart flutter. Older now, sharper, a quiet storm behind his eyes. "Hello, Lily," he said gently. Her heart skipped. "Ethan was in town," Richard explained, "and when he heard what happened—" "I came to help," Ethan finished, stepping closer. "If you'll let me." Lily swallowed hard. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A warm, cautious, painful kind of hope. She shifted Noah in her arms, trying to steady her breath. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" Ethan's gaze softened. "Because no woman should ever have to survive what you did," he said. "And because you're not alone, not anymore." Her knees wavered. Her heart trembled. And for the first time since leaving Manhattan, Lily felt the ground beneath her begin to steady. But none of them knew. Just miles away, Mark had finally cracked. And his confession was about to change everything. Mark hadn't slept, not for a second. The basement felt smaller than before, as though the concrete walls were inching closer with every breath he took. The bulb overhead cast a sickly pale glow that made his skin look ghostly. Sweat plastered his shirt to his back. His hands were numb from the ropes, his legs trembled uncontrollably. But worst of all was the silence. Silence leaves a man alone with himself. Mark had never survived well in silence. His mind spun in frantic circles, flashes of Lily crying, the nanny cam footage of him yelling, Vanessa walking up the stairs without looking back. The sound of Noah wailing in the background of one of the recordings. That image haunted him most. Noah. His son. His tiny body shaking while Mark screamed at the only woman who had ever cared for him. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The door creaked open. Mark jerked upright, pulse slamming against his ribs. He expected Richard. Instead, one of Richard's men stepped inside, a tall man with sharp eyes and the kind of quiet power that didn't need volume to terrify. "Ready to talk?" the man asked. Mark swallowed, throat dry. I didn't do all that." I'm not." The man tilted his head. "The screen says you did." Mark's eyes darted to the monitor. His own face stared back at him again, twisted with rage, frozen in a moment he could no longer excuse. He wished he could smash the screen, wished he could erase his voice, but he couldn't. The truth was staring at him, and he hated himself for the first time in his life. "Tell the truth," the man said. "It's time." Mark shook his head. chest heaving. I wanted her to listen, to stop nagging. I didn't mean. Say what you did, the man insisted. Mark's voice cracked. I hurt her. The man didn't blink. Keep going. Mark's eyes burned. I yelled at her, a lot. I hit her, not just once, more than once. He gasped, as though his own admission punched the air out of him. And the baby? The man asked. Mark closed his eyes. Shame forced the words out of him like broken glass. He saw everything. The man stepped forward, pressing the red button on the small recording device on the table. Start over, he said. Then he walked to the door. Mark panicked. No, wait, don't leave me. But the door shut behind him, locking with a metallic snap. The red light blinked. Recording. Mark stared at it, trembling, unable to breathe. He knew what would happen if he didn't speak. He'd stay here, alone, with his guilt, with the truth, and with a man upstairs who had every reason to destroy him. He sucked in a shuddering breath. Then, for the first time in his life, he stopped lying. My name is Mark Doyle, he whispered. His voice broke, and I abused my wife. The words fell heavy in the air, undeniable, irreversible, a confession he could never take back. More truth followed, stumbling and halting at first, then spilling out faster. His drinking, his anger, the nights he left Lily home alone, the bruises, the threats, the time he shattered a plate beside her head. He confessed to every cruel intention, every calculated insult, every moment he crushed her spirit. With each admission, he felt something inside him crack, something he had built to survive, something made of pride and ego and cruelty. It crumbled. By the time he finished, his cheeks were soaked and his chest felt hollow. The recording beeped, stopped. Silence returned. Then footsteps again. The door opened. Richard stepped inside, his face unreadable. Mark couldn't look at him. Richard approached slowly, then picked up the device. He rewound a few seconds. Mark's voice echoed back through the basement. And I abused my wife. Richard turned the device off. That's all I needed, he said quietly. Mark swallowed hard. So you're letting me go? Richard studied him. For a long, heavy moment, Mark dared to hope. Then Richard spoke. You're leaving this basement, he said. But don't confuse that with freedom. Mark's heart froze. What does that mean? He whispered. Richard stepped aside, allowing light from the hallway to spill into the room. It means your life, Richard said softly, is no longer yours to control. The words sank into Mark's spine like ice. And upstairs, a courtroom team listened to the confession that would soon end everything Mark ever pretended to be. The wind swept across the Texas ranch with a dry whisper, stirring dust along the long gravel driveway. Inside the house, Lily sat with her father and Ethan at the dining table, papers spread between them, coffee cooling in untouched mugs. The legal plan for custody was nearly complete. Her statement was strong. The evidence was undeniable. And for the first time, Lily felt like she was taking back control. Noah napped peacefully in the living room, curled in a soft blanket beneath the hum of a ceiling fan. The entire house felt calm, steady, anchored. She didn't know it was the stillness before a storm. Outside, a black sedan slowed at the edge of the property. Its engine rumbled faintly, barely audible over the wind. A man inside leaned forward, eyes fixed on the ranch house. Mark. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot, hair wild. He hadn't slept since the basement. He hadn't eaten. His sanity had fractured into pieces sharp enough to cut him from the inside out. He had escaped only because Richard let him walk out the door. But Richard let him go for a reason, and Mark didn't understand that reason. All he knew was that Lily was going to take his son, his last shred of identity. And something inside him snapped. He whispered to himself, "She can't do this. She can't take him from me." His shaking fingers gripped the steering wheel until the veins in his hands bulged. Then he stepped out of the car, stumbling, wild-eyed, his mind consumed by one goal: get Noah back. Not because of love, but because losing meant facing who he really was. Inside the house, Ethan leaned forward, pointing to a section of the custody papers. "This guarantees he won't have visitation rights without supervision," he explained. "With what your father uncovered, no judge will." A noise cut him off, the sound of gravel crunching under hurried footsteps. Richard's head snapped toward the window. His expression changed instantly, hardening, sharpening, shifting into a mode Lily had only seen glimpses of. He stood. "Stay here," Lily's heart lurched. "Dad, what is it?" But he didn't answer. He moved toward the front door with a predator's steadiness. Ethan rose too, sensing danger. "Lily, get Noah." She didn't ask questions. Her instincts surged awake as she rushed to the living room. Noah stirred when she lifted him, blinking sleepily. She pressed him against her chest and backed into the hallway just as Richard threw open the front door. Mark stood on the porch, eyes wild, breath ragged, hands shaking. "Where is he?" Mark demanded. Richard stepped between him and the doorway. "You need to leave." Mark's laugh was hollow, unhinged. "You think I'm scared of you? You think I'm scared of anyone anymore? I'm taking my son." "You're not taking anything," Richard said evenly. Mark lunged, but Ethan appeared behind Richard, grabbing Mark and shoving him backward. Mark stumbled down the porch steps, hitting the ground hard. But he scrambled up with a snarl. "I'll call the cops!" Mark shouted. Richard didn't flinch. "Do it. Your confession's already with them." Mark froze. Those words hit him like a bullet. "You didn't," Mark whispered. Richard's silence answered for him. Mark's face twisted. Rage replaced fear. He charged again, this time racing toward the side of the house, toward the open hallway window, toward Lily. Lily held Noah tighter, backing away as Mark's shadow moved closer, faster. "Give him to me," he screamed from outside. "He's my son." Her breath shattered. "No," she whispered. Mark reached the window. He shoved his arm inside. His fingers brushed Noah's blanket. Ethan grabbed Mark's wrist from behind, twisting it hard. Mark cried out, stumbling backward as Richard appeared beside Ethan, the two men corralling Mark like a cornered animal. "Stop fighting," Richard warned, "before you make this worse." Mark thrashed. "I am his father." Richard stepped closer, eyes burning. "And a father protects his child from himself." Mark froze. Just long enough. Ethan took him to the ground with a swift, controlled movement. Dirt sprayed. Mark screamed, writhing as if fighting demons instead of men. Lily watched from the doorway, heart pounding. Her father's voice cut through Mark's cries with terrifying calm. "This ends now, Mark." Mark struggled one last time, then collapsed, sobbing into the dirt. Defeated, broken, powerless. And as the sheriff's sirens approached from down the road, Lily realized something undeniable. Mark's grip over her life had finally shattered. The courthouse in Austin stood tall and gleaming beneath the hot Texas sun, its stone pillars casting long shadows across the wide steps. People hurried in and out, clutching files and coffee cups, the air buzzing with tension. But for Lily, walking through those front doors felt like stepping into the center of her own storm. Noah rested on her hip, his small hand gripping her sweater, unaware of the battle unfolding around him. Ethan walked beside her, steady and calm, a quiet presence she had begun to rely on more than she meant to. Behind them, Richard strode forward with the quiet authority of a man who'd been preparing for this day for years. The three formed an unlikely but determined unit, a family rebuilt through fire. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers the moment Lily entered. Her bruises had faded, but the mark on her soul had not. People glanced at her with sympathy, judgment, curiosity. She kept her chin up anyway. The bailiff called for order, and Lily took her seat beside her lawyers. Mark was escorted in next, hands cuffed, expression pale and hollow. He glanced at her only once, quickly, like a man terrified of his own reflection. Vanessa sat on the opposite side of the room, dressed in a conservative blazer, makeup subdued, but nothing could wash away the fear in her eyes. Not even her father's expensive legal team sitting around her like a shield. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Then the hearing began. "Your Honor," Lily's attorney began, standing confidently, "we are petitioning for full custody of Noah Carter Doyle, along with a permanent restraining order against the father, Mark Doyle. We submit into evidence a series of nanny cam recordings, medical reports, bank statements, text messages, and—" The attorney clicked a button. A large monitor came to life. The room went silent. Mark's recorded voice filled the courtroom, echoing through the walls. "And I abused my wife." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Mark froze, his face draining of every last trace of color. He shot a desperate look toward Vanessa. She refused to meet his eyes. For the first time in his life, Mark realized there was no one left to save him, not even the woman who had helped ruin Lily's life. The judge leaned forward. "Is this recording authentic?" Richard stood. "Yes, Your Honor. It was obtained legally from a device owned by Lily Carter." Mark's lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, the defendant was under duress. He was telling the truth," the judge said sharply. "Sit down." Mark sank back in his seat, trembling. Next came the nanny cam footage. Lily shielding her face, Mark hurling insults, objects flying, Noah crying in the background. Every clip drew another wave of shock from the courtroom. Lily kept her gaze fixed on her hands. She couldn't watch. She'd spent years living inside those moments. She didn't need to relive them again. When Vanessa was called to the stand, she walked forward with stiff shoulders. Her father, Thomas Hale, glared at her from behind the defense table, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack. She swallowed, adjusting the microphone. "Miss Hale," Lily's attorney said, "did you encourage Mr. Doyle to harm his wife?" Vanessa hesitated. The room held its breath. Then she nodded. "Yes." Gasps erupted again. "And did you record the incident at Raven Bar?" "Yes." "And did you attempt to use this recording for leverage against the Carter family?" Her eyes flickered toward Richard. Cold, unyielding. "Yes." The judge slammed his gavel. This case just became significantly more serious. Thomas Hale stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my daughter acted independently, and your corporation's involvement will be reviewed in a separate investigation," the judge snapped. "Sit down." Hale's face turned white with rage, but Lily felt something inside her loosen, like a chain breaking link by link. Finally, the judge turned to her. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "would you like to speak?" Her knees trembled as she stood. She held Noah close. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "I loved him," she began. "I tried to build a family. I tried to be enough, but no woman should be punished for trying her best. My son deserves safety, peace, kindness, and I will spend my life giving him those things. But he cannot have them if his father is in it." Her eyes met the judge's. "I am asking not out of anger," she whispered, "but out of love for my child." Silence. Then the judge nodded. "Full custody granted. Restraining order approved. Mr. Doyle will face criminal charges." Lily exhaled, a breath years in the making. But as relief washed over her, she didn't see Vanessa rushing out of the courtroom or Thomas Hale realizing his empire had just begun to crumble. All she felt was this truth. Her fight was finally being won. Thomas Hale had always walked through the world like a man immune to consequence. He built an empire out of intimidation, polished it with charm, and protected it with layers of lawyers and money. For decades, the Hale name meant influence, power, untouchability. But the moment he stepped out of the courtroom, after watching his daughter confess to manipulation and witnessing Mark Doyle crumble under his own truth, Thomas felt something he'd never felt before. The ground under him shifted. He marched down the courthouse steps, jaw tight, Vanessa hurrying behind him. "Dad, Dad, wait," she called, heels clattering as she struggled to keep up. "Just let me explain." "Not here," he snapped, "not in public." They reached the curb where a sleek black town car waited. Thomas opened the back door, slid inside, and glared at Vanessa until she followed. The driver pulled away. For a long stretch of highway, neither of them spoke. The silence was suffocating. Vanessa's fingers twisted in her lap. "Dad, listen. What happened today, it wasn't all." "Your stupidity," Thomas finally said, "may cost me everything." Vanessa flinched as though struck. "I didn't mean." "That's the point, Vanessa. You didn't think. You didn't plan. You didn't calculate." His voice sharpened. "You acted like a child with matches in a room full of dynamite." Her eyes glossed with tears she refused to let fall. "I was trying to help you," she whispered. Thomas scoffed. "Help me? By provoking the one man in Texas I never wanted as an enemy?" Vanessa pressed her back against the seat. Her chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Sorry won't protect us now," Thomas muttered, staring out the window. He didn't see her shoulders tremble. But the fallout had only begun. The first blow struck within hours. Thomas's phone buzzed relentlessly. Emails, missed calls, emergency alerts from his board members. The allegations had gone public, faster than he expected. Headlines exploded across news sites. Karis involved in abuse cover-up, hard proof links Hale family to manipulation scandal video. Evidence implicates Mark Doyle and Vanessa Hale. Thomas scrolled through the notifications, each one slicing deeper. "This is manageable," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll release a statement, deny involvement, redirect the narrative." But when he called his PR chief, the line rang 4 times before a tight voice answered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. The firm has terminated its contract with you." His jaw clenched. "On what grounds?" "Conflict of ethical interest," the woman replied. The board voted unanimously. The line went dead. Vanessa watched her father slowly lower the phone. The second blow came minutes later. Thomas's attorney called. "There's a federal inquiry," he said without greeting. "Your previous dealings with Richard Carter's company are under review." Thomas's face drained of color. "That was years ago." "Doesn't matter. Someone resurrected the evidence." "Richard." Thomas rubbed his forehead. Sweat gathered at his temple. "What are my options?" "Cooperate," the attorney said. "Fight, and they'll find more." Thomas cursed under his breath. The third blow followed like a hammer. Another call. His CFO. "Sir, I'm stepping down." Thomas's voice dropped to a growl. "You're abandoning me." "I'm protecting myself," the CFO said. "Half the board is resigning. Investors are pulling out. Sir, the company is collapsing." Thomas slammed the phone onto the seat, chest heaving. "This can't be happening," he whispered. Vanessa swallowed hard. "Dad, what do we do?" For the first time in her life, she saw uncertainty in her father's eyes. He opened his mouth to answer. But before he could speak, the sedan jerked to a stop. The driver turned, face pale. "Sir, you need to hear this." He tapped the radio. A reporter's voice filled the car. And in breaking news, a full confession from Mark Doyle has been released to authorities and the press. Sources confirm the recording directly implicates both Doyle and Vanessa Hale in an abuse conspiracy and may trigger a larger investigation into the Hale Development Group. Vanessa gasped softly. Thomas's breathing faltered. The reporter continued. "Richard Carter, longtime rival of the Hale family, is cooperating with investigators. Legal experts predict severe penalties, including potential indictments." Thomas's vision blurred. His empire, the empire he built with blood, fear, and silence, was falling apart brick by brick. Vanessa touched his arm. "Dad!" He pulled away. Hard. She recoiled, wounded. Thomas stared straight ahead, voice hollow. "It's over," he murmured. For a man like him, those words were a death sentence. But the final blow came from a single thought Vanessa couldn't silence. Richard Carter hadn't even truly begun. And when Lily learned what else her father had uncovered, the Hale legacy would collapse for good. The Texas sky stretched wide and blue above the ranch, the kind of sky Lily used to dream about when she was stuck in her tiny Manhattan apartment. Weeks had passed since the courtroom showdown, and the world around her had finally begun to quiet. The news cycle moved on. The Hale empire crumbled. Mark was taken into custody to await sentencing, denied bail. Vanessa disappeared from the public eye, her name now synonymous with scandal. And Lily, at long last, was free. The morning sun cast warm light across the porch as she stepped outside with Noah on her hip. He giggled, reaching for the breeze, his tiny fingers brushing the air like he was greeting a new world. She kissed the top of his soft head, inhaling the simple peace of the moment. For the first time in years, she woke without fear, without the heaviness of walking on eggshells, without wondering which version of Mark she would face. Richard opened the screen door behind her. "Mind some company?" he asked. She smiled. "Always." He carried 2 mugs of coffee and set one beside her. The porch creaked beneath his weight as he sat, shoulders relaxed, for once. The lines in his face looked softer, less burdened. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel lighter," she replied. It wasn't a lie. Though the wounds were deep, healing had finally begun. A soft rumble approached from the driveway. A familiar engine. Noah perked up, babbling excitedly. Lily's heart fluttered before she even turned. Ethan Ward's black Mercedes rolled to a gentle stop beneath the shade of a pecan tree. He stepped out, wearing jeans, boots, and a light button-down that made him look perfectly at home on the ranch. A small bouquet of wildflowers sat in his hand. Lily felt her stomach warm. She tried to steady her breathing as Ethan approached, but something about him, the calm in his posture, the kindness in his eyes, made it hard. He stopped a few feet away, smiling softly. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she answered, cheeks warming. Richard stood, sensing the shift. "I'll check on the horses," he said, patting Lily's shoulder before heading down the porch steps, leaving them alone. Ethan nodded toward Noah. "Looks like someone's growing fast." "He is," Lily said, brushing Noah's hair. "He's happier too. I think he feels the difference." Ethan's expression softened. "Kids always know when the world gets safer." She swallowed. "It's still strange, being safe. You'll get used to it." He hesitated, then held out the bouquet. "These are for you." Lily blinked. "They're beautiful." "They reminded me of you," he said gently, "stronger than they look." Her heart twisted, warm, aching, hopeful. She accepted the flowers, brushing her thumb over the petals. "Thank you." Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly shy in a way that surprised her. "There's something else. I wanted to talk to you about something." Lily's pulse quickened. "Okay." "I know you've been through hell," he said, "and I know healing doesn't happen overnight. I'm not here to push you or rush anything, but I care about you, Lily, deeply. And if there's a place in your life for me, I'd be honored to earn it." Her breath caught. She looked down at Noah, then back at Ethan. "Ethan, I don't know if I'm ready for something big," she whispered. "You don't have to be," he said softly. "Just let me walk beside you while you figure it out." She felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from relief, from gratitude, from realizing how different real love could feel. She stepped closer, Noah nestled between them. "I want that," she said quietly. "I want to try." Ethan's eyes warmed. "We'll go slow, one day at a time." She nodded, feeling something inside her shift, opening, healing. Then, unexpectedly, Noah reached out and patted Ethan's cheek. Lily laughed through her tears. Ethan's smile widened. In that moment, under the wide Texas sky, surrounded by quiet fields and a future she finally felt worthy of, Lily Carter understood something profound. Her past had tried to break her, but her future would rebuild her. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, gentle and sure. She leaned into him, letting hope settle into her bones like sunshine. Richard watched from the barn, a small, satisfied smile on his face. Justice had been served. The family he thought he'd lost was whole again. And Lily, his brave, resilient daughter, was finally living the life she deserved. And with the past buried and the world opening before her, Lily stepped into a future filled not with fear, but with love. So that's where our story comes to an end. And if you're still here with me, listening until this very moment, then something in this journey touched your heart in a way words can't fully explain. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it echoed a quiet pain you've carried. Or maybe it simply showed you that healing is possible, even after the darkest nights. Life doesn't always give us fairness. But like Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Lily's suffering didn't end her. It shaped her. It pushed her toward courage, toward truth, toward love. And that's something every one of us can carry into our own lives. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve to be loved in a way that doesn't hurt. And if today's story reminded you of that, even just a little, then I hope you allow yourself to step into your own new beginning, just like Lily did. If this touched your heart, my friend, please don't leave quietly. Like the video. Share it with someone who might need this message, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue healing, learning, and supporting each other, one story at a time. You're not alone. Not here. Not ever.